This
What we discussed
conference will
was
now be recorded.
we started Power View. In the Power View, we discussed till hierarchies and drill down visuals. The next topic after hierarchies and drill down visuals is today's class is class number 7. In the class 7, we'll start discussing about visuals for filtering the data. So I listed what are the different categories of visuals we have. So out of these categories of visuals, we'll start with the first category of visuals. What is the first category of visuals we have is visuals for filtering the data. In that first category of visuals also, the first visual we will be discussing today is a visual with the name called what? Slicer visual. So what is the agenda for today's classes? We'll discuss what is slicer visual, their purpose, field wells, formatting options, and what are the different slicer types we have, and something called clear selection, slicer versus filter, sync slicer. Few points we'll discuss in today's class. In order to discuss visualizations, you need to load some tables into the Power Pivot first. If you have some tables, the tables we can use it for building the visuals. Let's load some tables here. Click on Get Data. I'll just load orders table, or to create couple of visuals, I'll just load orders table. Click on Load. Once I have the orders table, I can go and start creating the visuals. I can go and comfortably start creating the visuals, guys. Here, I'll just go to report view and I can start creating the visuals here. So first let me create what is the visual we are planning to learn is slicer. So before I take the slicer visual, I'll create a couple of visuals here. Now tell me in the orders table, how many regions data we have in the orders table currently? 4 regions data. When I go and select any region column here, you can see it contains 4 regions data. When I go and create some visuals or report here, I'm creating one card visual. When I go and drag the quantity here, it will show quantity for all the 4 regions. I can just do some basic formatting, reducing the number size to some 30, adding some visual border. Visual border will do that. Right. We are showing all the 4 regions quantity. We can even show all the 4 regions sales. And I'll show all the 4 regions profit also here. I'll take another card visual. In another card visual, I'll drag the profit. So client, first they are seeing the all 4 regions quantity, sales, profit. So once they understand all the 4 regions, how they are doing, let's say you are a training institute owner, guys. I'm just giving a simple example. As a training institute owner, initially when I open the report, I might need to see what is the total revenue generated or total, what is the total fee collected. As a training institute owner, initially he need to see the total figures. Once he see the total fee, then he want to filter the data by himself, and he might need to see each course what is the fees they are getting. Once they see the total fee, then they want to select any course here. When they select any course by themselves, it need to filter the data and it need to show only that course data. When I go and select any course here, SQL Server, who will select that course is clients. Then they want to see the data, that corresponding data here. Here also client is asking, initially in Power BI Desktop, you are generating a report. Initially, when you share that report with your client, client want to see complete data. Once they see complete data, they want to be more specific about each region. They're telling that they want to themselves select any region. When they select any region by themselves, they want to see that corresponding region data here. What they want to see? That corresponding region data. So the requirement is, there are sometimes clients will ask us, generate the reports and provide us the provision to filter the data by clients itself. Clients will ask us to generate the reports, and in that reports, clients itself need to filter the data. Clients will ask us to generate the reports, ask us to generate reports and ask us to provide a provision, ask to provide a provision to filter the data by themselves, filter the data by themselves. So look at here, client is asking, I want to select any region here. When I select any region here, that corresponding region data I need to see, they're asking. For that, what is the visual you will use is, what is the visual? Slicer. It's a common requirement. It's a common requirement with the clients. Clients will ask us to generate some reports to the developers. In the reports, clients need to filter the data by themselves. So in that cases, you need to add one slicer visual. So when you add a slicer visual, into the slicer visual, we can drag one column called region. When I drag the region, I can see the list of regions here. Now you can save the report. You can publish the report. You can share the report with the client. When you share the report with the client, client can see how many regions data initially, all four regions. Once he is fine with all four regions, then he can go and select any region. That region data they can see here. When I go and click on central, now in the visuals we are seeing what data now? Only central data. Only central data. So whenever we need to, now fine, we are trying to learn first visual with the name called what? Slicer. Whenever we need to learn any visual, first thing you need to learn about the visual is what? Purpose. In what scenarios you need to use that slicer visual, you need to learn. That is nothing but purpose. Second thing you need to learn about the visual is that visual contains how many field wells. Second thing we need to learn about the visual is what? How many field wells it contains. Field wells are nothing but what? When I take the pie chart contains legend, values, details, tooltips. We call them as what? Field wells. Field wells. So we need to learn what are the field wells it contains, where to place dimension columns and where to place fact columns. We already discussed about dimension columns and fact columns in the introduction fifth class. So introduction classes fifth class, if you go, you can see dimension columns and fact columns. And finally you need to learn the formatting options. First let me talk about the purpose of the slicer visual. I'll write first purpose of the slicer visual. What is the purpose of the slicer visual is, slicer visual is used to filter the data in the report page by the client. If someone asks you, what is the use of slicer visual? What is the use of slicer visual means? You need to tell like this. Slicer visual is used to filter the data in a report page by the clients, by the clients. So here, my client is asking to provide a provision to filter the data based on the region. So you need to take uh, you are creating one report. In the report, they're asking to show quantity, sales, and profit. They're planning to filter the data, these three columns based on region. You just need to take one slicer. Into that slicer, we need to drag which column here? Region column. And in that slicer, they can filter the data in the visuals. Second thing we need to learn is, okay, we written the purpose here. Purpose here. Second thing we need to learn about this field wells. When I go to slicer visual, how many field wells it contains? When I go and take the slicer visual contains how many field wells here? Only one field well with the name called what? Field. Only one field well. Some visuals will have four field wells. Some visuals will have six field wells. Some visuals even will have only one field well also. Currently, you have only one field well. Into this field well, you need to know whether we will drag dimension columns or fact columns. Whether we will drag what? Dimension columns or fact columns. Tell me, will we drag dimension columns or fact columns? You just tell
Dimension
me.
columns.
Into the slicer visual, will we drag dimension columns or fact columns?
Dimension
Dimension
columns.
columns.
Dimension columns, guys. Always into that will drag dimension columns. Correct. Just a second. Dimension columns only. Fine. So whether we will drag one dimension column or multiple dimension columns, you need to have an idea, guys. Into the field well, there is no doubt we can drag dimension columns. So will it allow only one dimension column or will it allow multiple dimension columns? You need to learn. So here, try to understand when I go and drag category, it got allowed. When I go and drag another dimension column, is it allowing? How many dimension column you drag now? Category as well as region. That means it will allow multiple dimension columns. So we are talking about once after the purpose, we are talking about the field wells. Field wells. How many field wells you have is only one field well we have. What is the name of the field well is field. What is the name of the field well is? What is the name of the field well is field. What you will drag there? Dimension columns. So into that field we can drag multiple dimension columns. So recommended is to drag multiple related dimension columns only. Related dimension columns only. Let's take an example. My client is asking to provide a provision to filter the data in these three visuals based on category column, based on subcategory column. Right? Understand? Your client is asking to provide a provision to filter the data in these three visuals based on category column as well as what? Subcategory. One way what we can do is we can take one slicer visual. Into the first slicer visual, you can go and drag the category column, and you can go and take another slicer visual. Into the another slicer visual, you can go and drag subcategory column. You can go and drag subcategory column. This is the one way. You can go and select any category. Currently, you are seeing which category data there? Furniture. In that furniture, how many subcategories are there? Four subcategories. If you want to be more specific with chairs, you can just go and click on what? Chairs. And you are seeing what data now means in the furniture category, which data you are seeing? Chairs, how much quantity, how much sales, how much profit. So here, instead of going and using two slicer visuals here, as they are related dimension columns, category and subcategory are related with each other or not? Yes. Better to go and show them in the single slicer visual, guys. Better to go and show them in where? Single slicer visual. I'm taking a slicer visual. Already I drag the category column, right? Below the category column, you can just go and add the subcategory column. Already category column is there. I can go and drag the subcategory column. When I drag the subcategory column, whenever my client want to see complete technology data, they can go and select technology. When I click on technology, all the subcategories it is showing. What it is showing? All subcategories. In technology, I want to be more specific with copiers means uncheck technology, go and click on copiers. Now what filter will have? Technology category, which one? Copiers, how much quantity, how much sales, how much profit. When they are related dimension columns, better to show them in the single slicer itself. So like this, you can expand any category now. When you expand any category, what you can see? Subcategories. Under that category, what are the subcategories you will have? You can see under that category, furniture category, how many subcategories you have? Three subcategories, right? Like this. So we are telling that into the field wells, we have a field well with the name field. We can drag what? Multiple related dimension column. Let's take an example. My client is asking to provide a provision to filter the data in the visuals based on category column and region column. Based on which two columns? Category and region. Now one way, I can take one slicer, I can go and drag the category column. Second thing is I can take another slicer. Into the another slicer we'll drag which column? Region column. Client can select any category. Currently he can see technology data. In technology also I can select central. When I select central, what data you are seeing? How many filters you might have now? Category is technology, region is central. So this time these two dimension columns are not related with each other. Do you ask me why instead of going with a separate slicer, why don't you go and drag the region here? Means not recommended. Even when you drag it, it will allow. Is it allowing? When I drag region means it will allow. When I go and expand furniture, you will have four regions. When I go and expand office supplies, you will have four regions. So when they are not related dimension columns, it's not recommended to have them in the same slicer. Only they're recommended to have in the same slicer when they are related. If you want to provide a provision to filter the data based on category as well as based on region, you need to go with two different visuals, guys. Go with what? Two different visuals. When you can drag multiple dimension columns to the slicers means when they are related with each other. Category, subcategory, product name. Can I drag product name means yes, they are related with each other. Now I can go and expand any category. Now when I expand the category, I can see the subcategories. When I expand any subcategory, I can see the products. When I go and select any product, that product related data I can see. How many filters you might have this time? Category is technology, subcategory is copiers, product name is Canon images, right? Like this three filters, they can clear this filter. When they are related dimension columns, you can drag it to the same size. There are sometimes, even though they are related dimension columns, client is not interested to see in the single slicer. So they want to see two different slicers, category one slicer, subcategory another slicer. There is no doubt category and subcategory you can even show in one slicer. There are sometimes clients they need to be more clear. They don't want to have them in same visual. So category they will ask us to show in one visual, subcategory they will ask us to show in another visual. So no problem. It's completely depends upon the client requirement. But you remember that into the field, it is recommended to drag what? Multiple related dimension columns. So fine, we understand what is the purpose of the slicer visual and how many field wells it contains, where we will drag dimension columns or fact columns. We understand we'll drag dimension columns. What is the next thing you need to understand? Formatting options, guys. To learn any visual, we need to learn three things: purpose, field wells, and then formatting options. Here it might take a lot of time to explain slicer formatting options. No worries. So only for slicer visual to discuss formatting options, it might take more time. In coming visuals, it will not take much time. So for slicer visual, but I'll take to explain the formatting options, I'll take today's class and next class also. Only for this visual. Remaining visuals, it doesn't take much time. Okay, let's take the slicer visual. Let's drag the region column. The first formatting option I'll discuss about is when you select the slicer visual, slicer type is there. Some people will now currently the slicer type is in the list format. Instead of list format, sometimes clients will ask us to show drop down format. What is that? Drop down. So they want to show now currently you are showing all the regions in the list format. Instead of list format, you need to enable the drop down button. When I click on drop down, they want to see the regions. I want to select it from the drop down. How to change that slicer type is go to where? Format. When I go to format, there is something called formatting options are divided into two sections. One is visual related formatting options. Second one is general related formatting options. So when you go to the visual related formatting options, first we'll discuss visual and then we'll discuss general. So in the visual related formatting options, you have what? Slicer settings. When I go to the slicer settings, there is something called style of the slicer. What you have? Style. So in the slicer settings, you have options, and below the options you have what? Selection. We'll discuss. For now, we'll talk about what? Options. In the format, in the visual formatting, in the slicer settings, we're talking about what? Option. When I go to the options here, first one we'll talk about style. So there are vertical list. Next one is what? Tile. Next one is what? Drop down. So vertical list means now currently you are seeing the regions in the vertical list format. The same thing we can even convert it to what? Drop down. Now currently regions, they're not showing like a list, it is showing like a drop down. Whenever client want to select any region, they can click on this drop down, they can select the region, they can. I'll explain. So one more option you have is what? Tile. Tile means it will show like boxes. Now if you see each region, it is showing like one box. I can go on, each box is one tile. If you see, this is one tile, second tile, third tile, fourth. In order to see the data, east data, I can go and click on east tile. When I go and click on east tile, you can see that east region data. Right now, region is what data type column? Region column is what data type column? Text column. Region is what data type column? Text data type column. Text data type column. So for text data type column, what are the slicer styles? What are the slicer types you have? I'll discuss. So we are discussing about slicer types or styles, slicer styles or slicer types. Anyone is fine. So for text columns, text column, how many slicer types we seen is three. First one we see is what? Vertical list. Second one we see is what? Tile. Second slicer type we seen is what? Tile. Third slicer type we seen is what? Drop down. What is the default? Vertical list. Drop down. So by default, when you drag any text column, it will show in the vertical list format only. This is the default. Understand? The default slicer type is vertical list. Even look at here. I want to filter the data based on state column. When I want to filter the data based on state column, I'm taking a slicer. I want to drag which column here? State. It is showing in which style? Out of this three, currently it is what? Vertical list. Vertical list. So here, when to go with vertical list? When to go with the drop down means when you have less dimension values, vertical list is okay. State is containing how many dimension values? 49. When you have 49 dimension values, vertical list is not recommended, guys. Vertical list is not recommended. Region is having how many values? 4. Then vertical list is recommended. Whenever you have less dimension values, vertical list is recommended. Whenever you have more dimension values, which one is recommended? Drop down. So whenever we need to provide a provision to filter the data based on the state, vertical list is not recommended. Recommended to show it like drop down. How to change it to like drop down? Where you can change it? So whenever we need to make any change to the visual, where you need to go? Format. Select the visual, go to format, slicer settings, style, change it to what? Drop down. Change it to drop down. So even not only changing it to drop down, let's say I want to see Texas data. In order to see Texas data, you need to scroll down and you need to check where Texas is there. When you have more list of values, better to enable the search bar. Better to enable what in the top? Search bar. How to enable the search bar? So when you have more values, better to keep it in drop down. When you have more values, better to enable what in the top of the slicer means search bar. How to enable the search bar is go to the more options. In the more options, there is something called what here? Search. You click on this once. When I click on this once, you got a tick mark here. That means that search bar was enabled. What you are getting here? Search bar. Which region you are planning to see here? Texas. You can go and type Texas here, and you can see that state. When you select it, which region data it is showing now? Texas. Like if you want to clear the filter, let's say you select any one of the state, that state data you are seeing. If you want to clear that filter, where we can clear that filter? There is a eraser kind of button called what? Clear selection. When I clear selection, again it is showing all the states. There are some times, tell me, my client is asking to provide a provision to filter the data based on a region. So you drag the region. What is the slicer type currently here? Vertical list. Vertical list. Is it vertical list recommended here? When you have less values, we said that vertical list is also recommended. But there are some times, even when you have less values, client is interested to see this one also in the drop down. This one also in the, it's completely purely based on the client interest. Clients will tell us. So if you want to change it to drop down, again where you need to go? Format, settings. So you need to select what? Drop down. Now is it necessary to enable the search bar here? No need. You have less regions, right? So remember, vertical list, when you have less dimension values, okay. Even when you have less dimension values, people will prefer to go sometime what? Clients. It's purely based on the client interest. But when you need to go with drop down means when you have more values. Sometimes when you have less values, even client will be interested to see like tiles means boxes. So they want to select one of the in the box. How to convert it to the tiles means go to format, slicer setting, and change it to what? Tile. You can set it in one row, you want them in two rows, you want them however you want them, you can set it. I'm setting it in where now? One row, right? So they can select any region, they can filter the data, guys. Fine. So we understand for text column what are the different slicer types you have. Next one is for number column, you will find different slicer types, guys. For text column, you will find different slicer types. For the number column, you will find different slicer types. Look at here. I'll just go to, I'll just remove this. I'll just load a couple more tables, guys. How to load a couple more tables is click on get data Excel. I'll load it this time from EMP DEPT. I'll just select EMP DEPT managers table, click on load, click on load. Now just look at here. Look at here. I'll just go and create a one visual using employee table. Employee table, I have a salary column, I'll drag it. How many different employees are working with us? 10, 20, 30, and 54 departments. When I go and take one card visual, when I go and drag the salary column, how many department salaries it will show by default? All four. My client is asking to provide a provision to filter the data based on a column called department number column. Based on which column? Once I show, they want to see all departments what salary we are paying. Once after that, my client want to select a particular department number and they want to see what is the salary we are paying. How can you show particular department number and what is the salary we are paying is? You want to take one visual called what? Slicer. Into the slicer, you need to drag department number column. Department number column is a dimension column or fact column? Dimension column, right? I'll just go and drag the department number column here. So what is the slicer type you are seeing currently here is where you can check it. It's not a tile. Where you can check it, the slicer type. I can check the slicer type, select the visual, go to format, visual, slicer settings, options. So what is the slicer type? Between how many slicer types you have now? Vertical list, tile, drop down, between, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. How many slicer types you see? Six slicer types you see. Which slicer type we need to go with is important here. On a number data type column, number data type columns. On number data type columns, how many slicer types you'll have is, we seen this three as it is. What are the three? Vertical list, tile, drop down. Along with that, between, fourth one we seen is between, fifth one we seen is less than or equal to, or next one is what? Greater than or equal to. What is the default? Okay, you are seeing lot of here, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. What is the default here? Between. Default slicer type is what? When you drag the number column, the default slicer type will be between. So sometimes between is not necessary. Between, when it is required is when you have more dimensional value, between might be required. So in this current case, between is not required. Only how many values are there? Four. What is the best one to go with is vertical list. Less dimension values. Less dimension values, vertical list is fine. When I select 10th department, which department data I'm seeing? 10. So instead of vertical list, sometimes people will prefer to go with drop down also here. How to convert it to drop down? Change it to drop down. They can expand and they can select any department. They can see that corresponding department. Sometimes that values they would ask us to show like tiles also. How to show like tile? You can go here and you can set it. When I go and select 50th department, how much sum of salary we are paying? Only 10,000. Like this, they will ask us to change, guys. So here, in our current case, either this three they will ask you. Between is not required. When between is required is, let's take an example. I want to filter the data in these three visuals based on row ID. Row ID contains how many values? Row ID contains how many distinct values? 9994 distinct values are there. So when I want to filter the data in these visuals based on row ID, to filter the data, which visual we will take? Slicer. Into the slicer, I will drag what now? Row ID. Why? Because they want to filter the data based on row ID. When I drag the row ID, can I go and select the slicer type here? List. Is it recommended? How many values it will show in the list? 9994. Going and selecting the values from 9994 is not possible. Is it recommended to show drop down? Means even drop down will not work here. Drop down also will work when there is limited values. Even is it recommended to show like tiles? Means no. No, lot of tiles will be there. Going and selecting the values from the tiles is difficult. What is the best slicer type when you have more values? Between. In the between, I can go and select some starting row ID and I can go and select one ending row ID. When I select this, you are seeing the quantity sold starting from 1001 row ID to where? 2000 row ID. 1001 row ID to 2000 row ID. Like this, we can select starting range and between ending range. Between the two ranges, you can see the values. So between will allow you to change both starting range and ending range. So there are sometimes clients will, how to clear this selection, how to clear this filter, clear, clear selection. There are sometimes clients will ask us to provide a provision to change only ending range and fix the starting range to the constant value. So in order to allow, now currently between will allow change both starting and ending. One way to change the values is type the numbers. Second, sorry, type the number. Second way to change the values is you can even go and change it using what? Slider. In the bottom there is a slider. Using that slider also you can change the values, right? If you don't want to show the slider, sometimes when you have more values, changing that with slider will not possible. How can you stop this slider? Whenever we need to make any change to the visual, where you need to go? Format. When I go to the format, so where you can change that slider means there is something called what here? Slider. What you can do? Off. Only they can pass it through keypad. Pass it through keypad. Fine. It's up to us. If you want, you can bring it again. There are sometimes now you are able to allow to change starting range and ending range. There are sometimes where I need to allow only ending range. Which slicer type you will go? To change only ending range, what is the slicer type I need to go with? Huh? I need to allow them to change only ending range. When I want to change only ending range, if I want to fix the starting range, you need to go with an option called what? Less than or equal to. When I go with less than or equal to, it will allow you to change only ending range. When I write 5000 here, till what row ID it will show the data? Starting from first row ID till where? 5000 row IDs. So if you want to allow them to change only starting row ID, then you can go with what? Greater than or equal to. Greater than or equal to will allow you to change only starting range, starting from that range till end. It will show. So whenever there is a requirement like this, mostly we might use between, or we might use a vertical list based on the dimension values you have. This less than greater than very rarely we might use it, but keep in mind there is some options here. So these are the different slicer types we have on what data type column. So sometimes clients will ask us to provide a provision to filter the data on date columns also. Now I have a column called what? Order date. How many years data you have in this table? 4 years. These visuals are showing currently how many years data? 4 years. But client want to select any particular date range. For that date range, they want to see the data. So for your client, you need to provide a provision to filter the data based on which column? Order date. How can I do that is select which visual now? Slicer. Into the slicer visual, which column I can drag? Order date. When I drag the order date, what is the slicer type currently? Where I can see? Go to format, slicer settings. So what is the current slicer type? Between. But how many you have? Lot of slicer types of there. Vertical list, tile, between, before, after, drop down, relative date and relative type. Let's see. So for number data type column, how many slicer types you will have is seven, 7 or 8. Let's see what are that. So what is the next data type column here? Date data type column. So in date data type column also we seen what? Vertical list, tile, drop down, between is what? Default. When you drag the date column, you will get default between. Fifth one is what? Before. Sixth one is what? After. Sixth one is what? Seventh one is what? Relative date. Relative date. And eighth one is what? Relative time. So how many slicer types you have? 8. Right. So already I discussed of relative date and relative time. Where I discussed about relative date and relative time? Hmm?
filters in
I
data
discussed about relative date and relative time. Where?
in
Filters.
filters
Filters. When we, relative date and relative time will filter the data based on what? System date. Based
system
on
data.
the system date. Based on the system data. So here also, whenever we need to provide a provision to filter the data based on your system data, we can choose a slicer type called what here? Relative date. In the relative date, when I go and select last 3 days, it will show which 3 days data here? The orders which was placed on last 3 days. Last 3 days for us is what? 14, 15, 16. Do you have any orders placed on last 3 days? order date last 3 days. You don't have any data. So it will consider today's date, last 3 days. Sometimes the client requirement is when they go and select 3 days, from today last 3 days or from yesterday last 3 days. Now currently it is showing from today last 3 days or from yesterday. From today last 3 days. But client is telling that when I go and select 3 days, from yesterday last 3 days I want. I don't want to consider current day. I want to consider from yesterday last 3 days. How can we set that is? Select the visual, go to the format. In the format, go to the values. In the values, there is something called what? Include today. Include today is what currently? On. When you off this, from where? Yesterday, last 3 days. Yesterday, last 3 days. If you want from today, last 3 days, on this. On this. Like this, we need to change the formatting options, guys. So you don't have the data. That is the reason. Let's say when I go and select last 2000 days, do you have some data or not? Last 2000 days. Yes, last 2000 days is between these two day ranges, right? So what slicer type we generally go mostly with the date column is between, guys. Mostly with the date column, what is the best slicer type? We'll go with what? Between. Let's say I want to see only particular date data, guys. Let's say I want to see, just clear the selection, just go back once to relative date filter, clear the selection and come back to between. So now if you see, what is this? Uh, it is filled. Go back to relative date, and here clear the selection. Why even on clear it, it is still showing the. Let's remove this. Take the slicer. Somehow that filter was not cleared there. So take the slicer. When I drag the order date, what is the slicer type you are seeing currently? Between. So let's say I want to see 2015 data here. I can go and select this calendar button. I can click on one more time. Which year? 15 January 1st. 1st January 2015 I'm choosing here. What might be the ending date is? Again, I want to go to 2015. Which month? December 31st. Now currently you are seeing which year data? Only like this you can select start and end. So now tell me, if you want to clear the selection, you can clear the selection from here. Tell me now, in this, can we choose vertical list? Is it recommended vertical list here? No. Why? Lot of values are there. Is it recommended to go with tile here? No. Is it recommended to go with not between? Drop down? No. Even drop down is not recommended. Between? Is it fine? Yes. So between will allow you to change both start date and end date. Or you can even change the start date and end date using the sliders also. Right? And if you want to allow them to change only end date, which one? Only end date means before. When I go to before, it will allow me to change only end date. It will not allow me to change only start date. It will not allow end date. So if you go with after start date, if you want to provide a provision to filter the data based on our system date, relative date. If you have a column called date and time column, if you want to allow them to filter the data based on hours and minutes, based on the system date, relative. So they are simple options. We already know about all this. So mostly in the date column, what we will go? Between. Between. That is the reason the default one for the date column is between. We understand what now? Slicer types or slicer styles. So we understand all scenarios here. Once after slicer types or slicer styles, we understand even this clear selection also. The next one we will try to understand in today's class is when you try to filter the data in the, so take an example, I have a slicer here. In the slicer, I have a region column, and when I go and select East region, let's say I'll just copy these three visuals to page 4. I'm selecting three visuals, Control C, Control V. Now I'll just go and go to the page 1. There is a slicer in the page 1. When I go and click on central region, page 1 will show which region data? Central region data. My question is, page 4 will show what data? Will it show central data or all 4 regions data? All 4 regions data. Right. When you go and select central region here, page 1 will show what? Only central data. But when I go and check in the page 4 will show what? Complete data. That means slicer will filter the data in how many pages? Slicer visual is used to filter the data in a report page. Only where the slicer is there, that page it will filter the data by the clients. Sometimes clients will ask us, with the same slicer, provide me a provision to filter the data in the other pages, right? So in interview, they'll ask a question, important question. Is it possible to filter the data using the slicer in other pages? Is it possible to filter the data in the slicer in other pages of the report? Other pages of the report. Yes or no? By default, no, but you can configure it. Yes, there is a possibility. How it is possible means there is one option called sync slicer option, guys. What is that? Sync slicer option. So you need to configure it. By default, when I select any value in the slicer, it will filter only in that page. My requirement is when I go and select this value, it not only filter the data in the page 1, it need to even filter the data in where? Page 4. For that, you need to configure it. How to configure it is select the slicer and go to the view tab. Which tab? View tab. Once after going to the view tab, there is something called show panes. What you will have? Show panes. When I go to the show panes, there will be an option called what? Sync slicer. You just need to go and click on the sync slicer, guys. You need to go and click on sync slicer. When I click on sync slicer, a window will open with the name called what? Sync slicer window. There is two options here: visible sync, and there is check boxes. Currently, this slicer visual is visible in which page? So in which page that is there, it will filter by default or not? Yes. Now I want to not only filter the data in the page 1, with that slicer I want to even filter the page data in where? Page 4. You need to go and check page 1 and page 4. Slicer need to be visible in which page? Page 1. But it need to filter in how many pages? Page 1 as well as page 4. Page 4 you uncheck this. I don't want to see that slicer in the page 4. Slicer need to be visible in what? Only page 1. But it need to filter in how many pages? Page 1 as well as page 4. You are done with setting this. You close this. Once you close this, now when I click on central, page 1 is showing what data? Central. Page 4 will show what data? Central. Do you have any slicer here? No. Now when I go and change any region here, south, page 4 also will show what data? South. Like this, you can even filter in other pages also if required. So even I want to show this slicer in the page 1 as well as page 4 also, guys. How can you show this slicer in the page 1 and page 4 as well as? Select this, go to the view tab, sync slicer. You can even select what? Make it visible in page 4. When I go to the page 4, now you will have the slicer there. Yes or no? When I go and click on central, page 4 is showing which data? Central. Now tell me in the page 1 what data you will see? Central. When I go and click on east, page 1 will show east data, even page 4 will show what? East data. Like this, we can sync the slicers in multiple pages, guys. This question they'll ask you: is it possible to filter the data in the slicer? Is it possible to filter the data in the report page? Is it possible to filter the data in other pages of the report using slicer? Other pages of the report, pages of the report using slicer means what? Yes, using an option called what? Sync slicer. We clearly understand how to configure it, right? The next important question they'll ask you is, what is the differences between slicers versus filters? We understand slicer types. We understand field wells purpose. Now we understand sync slicer. Next one is what? Slicers versus filters. So what we are trying to understand is there is something in I'm in Power View. In Power View there is something called what here? Filters. There is something called what here? Slicers. What is the difference between that filters and slicers is the question here. Filters also used for filtering the data, right? Slicers also used for what purpose? Filtering the data. Both filters and slicers will filter the data used for filtering purpose. Both slicers and filters are used for filtering the data, for showing the subset of data, for showing subset of data, right? But important point is, of filters will be used by developers, slices will be used by clients. Filters will be used by developers to show subset of data. To show what? To show subset of data. But slicers will be used by clients. Slicers will be used by clients, guys. Whom they will use? Clients. To show to see the subset of data. To see what? Again, subset of data. When you use when developer apply any filters, that filters will hide some data to the clients. When I apply any filters here, let's take an example. I'm going to create one filter here. Remove this slicer. I'm going to create one filter on all pages based on a region column, and we'll select central region. Generally, when you apply any filters, we'll hide what? Filters pane to the client. We'll save this report. We'll publish this report. We'll share this report with your client. When you share this report with your client will see 4 regions data or only central data. Central. That means you are hiding some data to your client or not? Yes. So when you apply the filters, you are hiding some data to the client. So filters will hide data to the what? Clients. So it will show only a subset of data. Whenever your requirement is, my Power Pivot have complete data, but my Power Pivot have complete data, but I'm generating one of the report for central manager. For the central manager, I need to show only central data. I need to hide remaining 3 regions data to the central manager. In order to hide 3 regions data to the central manager, can you do it using slicer? Slicer by default show all the data. You cannot hide it. Whenever we need to hide some data to your clients, what you need to use is filters. But if you see here, instead of these filters, when I go and take the slicer, when I go and select the region, when I go and save this report, when I publish this report, when I share it, client will see 4 regions or 4. And later on they want, they can filter it, but they can even see other regions data. So keep in mind, slicers will not hide any data to the client. Slicers will not hide any data to the clients. Whenever we need to hide the data to the clients, developer need to use what? Their filters. Whenever you don't want to hide any data, you want to show all the data. For better understanding of the data, you need to provide a provision for them to filter the data. Then you'll use what? Slicers, right? Fine. We understand what is the difference between slicers versus filters, guys. Like this, we need to understand about remaining formatting options. A lot of different formatting options are there here. And I go to visual, we seen here. Next one we have is selections, guys. So anyway, we are discussing about what? Slicer settings. So in the slicer settings, we discussed so far what? Options. So below the options, you have what? Selections. When I go to the selections, there are some options like single select, multi select with control, select all. There are sometimes on the top, they will ask us to show select all button. What they'll ask us to show here? Select all button. How to show select all button on the top is, when I go on this, you can see another select all button in the vertical list. So I can select all, I can uncheck all of them at once. So that select all button will allow you to select all the well. For some reasons, if you want to show select all button on the top, you can show it. Next one is, I want to stop the select all for now. Go and stop it. Now just tell me, guys, when I select central, it is showing which region data? When I go and select east, what happening? Central is unselected and it is selecting what? East. When I go and select south, how many regions it is allowing me to select at a time? Only one. There are sometimes clients will ask us, I want to see multiple regions data together. I want to understand Power BI and SQL Server together, how much fees it is collecting. Power BI plus SQL Server together, how much fees we are collecting. Or I want to understand Central and East together, how much quantity we sold. So in order to see that, you need to select how many regions now? Two. By default, we can select the two regions with control button. With what? Multi select with control. There is a setting here. If you see these selections, in the selectors, there is something called what? Multi select with control is what? On. That means you can select multiple values with what button? Control button. That means if the client want to select two regions, hold the control button in the keypad and select the second region. Now currently how many regions data you are seeing? Region is central or east. So client will ask you, without control button I need to select. When I save this report, when I publish the report, if client want to select two regions, they need to hold the control button and they need to select the second region. Without control, they will ask us to select multiple regions. How to select multiple regions without control means you need to select the slicer visual, you need to go to selections and you need to off this. What you need to do now? Off. When you off this, they can select multiple values without what? Control. I'm just stopping this. When I stop this, look at here now. I'm not holding the control button. I'm selecting east. Then I'm going to what? Central and east. I'm not holding control button now. Without control button, I can select the multiple regions. Right? By default, with control. Without control, if you want to select multiple values, you need to go and stop this. Now I stopped it. There are some cases where they want to select multiple values. Better to go and stop this. Better to go and stop this. Off. Then they can go and select multiple values. Even they can select three values. Now when I go and select three values, how many regions data we're seeing here? Three regions data. The next one is, so at any cost, my client, they don't want to select multiple values with control or without control. There are sometimes requirement will be what? Even with control button, I don't want to allow my client to select multiple values. I want to allow them to select at any time only one value. At any point of time, how many values they can select? Only one value. For that, what you need to do? Single select is there. By default, single select is off. When single select is off, we can select multiple values either with control or either without control. At any cost, I need to provide a provision to my client to select only single value. To select only single value, you just on this. So they can select how many values at a time? I'm holding the control button. I'm selecting the east. Will it allowing to select two values now? No. Why it will allow it to select only one value? You selected a setting called what? Single select on. Right. Here we understand all the three options, guys. Single select, multi-select with control on and off, select all option. Selections also we understand. So when I click on reset to default, all the settings what you have done here and here, they will reset to which settings? Default. So in the formatting, we understand about what? Slicer settings. So fine. Next one is a slicer header, guys. What you have here? Slicer header. So slicer header is nothing but this one. This one we call it as what? Slicer header. This one we call it as what? Values. Values. See here, there are two formatting options. One is slicer header to format this top section. Second one is what? Values to format what? This values. If you want to change the color of central, east, south, west, or if you want to increase the text size of this region, where we can format it is in the slicer header. Where we can format it is values. Let's say in the region, I want to give a different color. Different color, we can show it. I want to increase the text size, we can show it. So here in the slicer header, you can format it. Self-explanatory option, guys. If you want to change the name also, you can change it. Currently, what is the name you have on the title? Slicer header region. Instead of region, you can even write what? Select region. You can write any text, and then you can select the font family, bold, all this. There is something called what? Show summary. When you on the show summary, currently you are seeing which region data? East. That summary it will show. When I clear it, how many regions data currently you are seeing? All. When I go and click on central, which region data I'm seeing? So if you want to show that summary there, you can on the summary. When I stop the summary, you cannot see this. For some reasons, if you want to on the summary, you can on the summary. So you can see it. Self-explanatory options you can find. If you want to add a border for this, or if you want to add a background color. So select region is there, right? In that background, I want to give some color. That yellow background color, I need to add it. You can add the background color. If you want to add one border for it, I can add the border between top, bottom, left, right, all the four areas for that. So like this, you can just format the slicer header. And the same way, you can even format what? Values here. So fine, we are done with understanding visual level formatting options, guys. In the next class, we'll talk about what? general formatting options. General formatting options are common for all the visuals. Visual formatting options will change visual to visual. For slicer visual, you will find different formatting options. For pie chart, you will find different options. But when it comes to general, the general formatting options are common for all the visuals. One time I will discuss about this general formatting options. For all other visuals, their options are same, general. Visual, they will change visual to visual. So in the next class, we are done with today's class, class 7. In the class 8, we'll discuss about formatting options of slicer. We'll talk about general formatting options. Right, I'll stop here. Important update.